The council chamber stretched across 3 kilometers of polished black stone and floating platforms. Representatives from 47 spacefaring civilizations sat in their designated sections, their forms ranging from towering reptilian giants to floating clouds of sentient gas. Ambassador Ellen Moore stood alone on the central platform, a single human woman facing the judgment of the galaxy. She had served Earth for 30 years. She had negotiated treaties and trade agreements. She had smiled at creatures who found her species primitive and amusing. She had endured their condescension because she believed that one day humanity would earn its place among the stars. Today that dream was dying. High Arbiter rose from his throne at the highest point of the chamber. His gray skin rippled with bioluminescent patterns that conveyed authority and finality. They had ruled this council for 6,000 years, and they had never once reversed a decision. "The charges against the human species are as follows," announced, his voice translated into 100 languages simultaneously. "Unauthorized expansion into 3-star systems without proper colonial permits, violation of established trade routes, and most seriously, interference with the lawful commerce of the Empire." Ellen felt her hands trembling but kept her voice steady. "High Arbiter, if I may respond to these charges." "You may speak, Ambassador Moore." She turned to face the assembled representatives, knowing that most of them had already made up their minds. The 3 systems we colonized were uninhabited. No species had claimed them in over 2,000 years. We followed every protocol for establishing new colonies. Delegate of the Empire rose from his seat, his scaled face twisted into something that might have been a smile on a human. "And what of our commerce, Ambassador? What of the cargo your warship stole from our convoy?" Ellen met his gaze without flinching. "Your cargo was 2,000 sentient beings, men, women, and children of the species. They were chained in your holds, destined for slave markets on your outer worlds." A murmur passed through the chamber. Some species shifted uncomfortably. Others watched with cold indifference. "They are a conquered people," replied smoothly. "Their fate is determined by law, not human sentiment. You had no right to interfere." They were crying out for help. Their children were screaming. "What would you have us do? Watch them be taken to lives of misery and call it respect for your laws?" High Arbiter raised one long-fingered hand for silence. "The Council recognizes that human ethics differ from galactic standards. However, this does not excuse the violation of established treaties. The Empire has demanded satisfaction." Ellen knew what was coming. She had known since she received the summons 3 weeks ago, but she had to try one more time. "High Arbiter, I ask this council to consider what kind of civilization we wish to build together. Is this a galaxy where the strong may enslave the weak without consequence? Is commerce in living beings something we should protect with treaties and laws?" The chamber fell silent. For a moment, Ellen allowed herself to hope, then laughed. It was a harsh, clicking sound that echoed off the walls. "The humans have been among us for barely 50 years, and already they presume to lecture us on morality. Perhaps this is why they should never have been admitted in the first place." The vote took less than an hour. 38 species voted to banish humanity from galactic civilization. 9 voted against, including the and several other minor species who had experienced cruelty firsthand. The rest abstained, unwilling to take sides. "The decision is final," declared. "All treaties between Earth and Council member species are hereby void. All trade agreements are canceled. Human vessels are forbidden from entering Council space. A quarantine zone will be established around human-controlled systems. Any human ship crossing this boundary will be destroyed without warning." Ellen stood motionless as the sentence was read. In the gallery above, Admiral Shaw watched with barely contained rage. He was 62 years old and had spent his entire career building Earth's small defensive fleet. He had believed that strength would earn humanity respect. He had been wrong. Their eyes met across the vast chamber. In that look, something passed between them, not despair but determination, not surrender but resolve. Ambassador Moore continued, "You have 7 standard days to remove all human personnel from Council space. After that period, any humans found outside the quarantine zone will be treated as hostile invaders." Ellen nodded slowly. She gathered her documents and prepared to leave the platform. Then she stopped and turned back to face the High Arbiter one final time. "You think you have destroyed us," she said quietly, but her voice carried across the silent chamber. "You think we will retreat to our little corner of space and wither away. You believe that without your trade and your technology and your guidance, humanity will fade into nothing." She paused, letting her words sink in. "You are wrong. You have shown us exactly what this council truly is. A club for the powerful to exploit the weak. A place where slavery is legal and compassion is a crime. We wanted to be part of your civilization. Now we understand that we must build our own." She walked off the platform with her head held high. Admiral Shaw fell into step beside her as she exited the chamber. "That was quite a speech," he said quietly. "It changes nothing." "No, but it felt right." They walked in silence through the corridors of Prime, past aliens who watched them with curiosity or contempt or something that might have been pity. "What happens now?" asked. Ellen smiled grimly. "Now we go home and we build." 12 hours later, every human vessel in Council space had departed. The last ship to leave was the diplomatic courier carrying Ambassador Moore. As it crossed the newly established quarantine line, Ellen looked back at the stars that humanity had just been exiled from. On Earth, President Daniel addressed the United Congress in an emergency session. The news had already spread across the planet. Protests erupted in some cities. Others fell into stunned silence. A few voices called for war, but everyone knew that was impossible. Earth's fleet numbered just 47 ships. The Council commanded tens of thousands. "We have been cast out," the President said. "We have been told that we are not worthy of the stars, but I say this to every citizen of Earth and our colonies. They have not defeated us. They have freed us, free from their rules, free from their contempt, free to become whatever we choose to be." He paused and looked directly into the cameras. "Today begins a new chapter in human history. They called us primitive. We will show them what primitives can do." The broadcast ended. Across 3 worlds, humanity began to prepare for a future they would forge alone. 20 years passed behind the wall of silence. The galaxy forgot about humanity. Council species went about their business, trading and warring and expanding as they always had. Occasionally someone would mention the humans, those strange, soft creatures who had briefly walked among the stars before being sent back to their corner of space. Most assumed they were struggling to survive without galactic trade. Some believed they had already collapsed into chaos. They could not have been more wrong. In the first year after banishment, President Daniel launched what he called the Century Initiative. It was an ambitious plan to make humanity completely self-sufficient within 100 years. Teams of scientists and engineers worked around the clock, studying every piece of alien technology that Earth had acquired during its brief time among the stars. Dr. Benjamin Cole led the most important of these teams. He was a quiet man of 43 with tired eyes and steady hands. Before the banishment, he had spent his career begging for scraps of alien science. The Council species had been happy to sell humanity outdated technology at enormous prices, always keeping their best innovations secret. Now Benjamin had a different mission: take apart everything they had bought, understand how it worked, then make it better. His laboratory occupied an entire level of the research station orbiting Earth. Hundreds of scientists worked under his direction, each focused on a different piece of the puzzle: propulsion systems, shield generators, weapons technology, communication arrays. Nothing was too small to study. The power cells use a crystalline matrix we have never seen before, one researcher reported during a morning briefing. We cannot replicate the crystals exactly. Benjamin nodded thoughtfully. Then find a different approach. If we cannot copy their solution, we create our own. This became the guiding principle of human innovation. Where alien species had followed the same technological paths for thousands of years, humans were forced to find new routes. Sometimes these routes led nowhere, but sometimes they led to breakthroughs that the galaxy had never imagined. By the fifth year, human shields were equal to anything the Council could produce. By the 10th year, they were stronger. Chief Engineer Nancy Park oversaw the construction of humanity's new fleet. She was 51 years old when the banishment happened, with 3 decades of experience building vessels that the galaxy considered primitive. Now she had unlimited resources and a single directive from the government: build ships that can fight. The orbital shipyards above Mars expanded every month. What had been a modest facility capable of producing 2 vessels per year became a sprawling industrial complex that launched a new ship every 3 weeks. Nancy designed each class herself, incorporating innovations that her team developed in real time. The Council ships are built for intimidation, she explained to her engineers. Big and impressive and covered in weapons. They fight the same way they have for. We are going to build something different. Human warships were smaller than their Council equivalents but faster and more maneuverable. Their weapons were precise rather than overwhelming. Their shields could absorb punishment that would destroy a battle cruiser. But the most important innovation was not technological, it was tactical. General Victor Lane established the Terran Military Academy on the outskirts of New Chicago. He was a student of history, and he understood that technology alone would not save humanity. They needed warriors who could think in ways the galaxy had never seen. The Council species have been fighting each other for 6,000 years, he told his first class of cadets. They have developed rules and patterns and expectations. When Fleet A meets Fleet B, both commanders know roughly what the other will do. This makes their wars predictable and their casualties manageable. He paused and looked across the eager young faces before him. We are going to be unpredictable. We are going to study every military genius in human history. Alexander, Hannibal, Napoleon. We are going to learn the lessons of Thermopylae and Stalingrad and Midway. And when we finally face the galaxy again, they will have no idea what hit them. The years passed. A generation grew up knowing only that their species had been rejected by the stars. Children learned about the banishment in school. They heard stories of the Council's arrogance and cruelty. They trained in simulators that prepared them for wars against alien fleets. Humanity transformed. The 3 colony worlds became industrial powerhouses. Asteroid mining operations expanded throughout the solar system and beyond. Population grew as families were encouraged to have more children. Every citizen knew their role in the great project. President served 2 terms before passing the torch to his successor. President Maria Santos continued his work with the same determination. She was the daughter of immigrants who had fled poverty on Earth to start new lives on the Mars colony. She understood what it meant to build something from nothing. We are not preparing for revenge, she said during her inauguration speech. We are preparing for the day when we can no longer be ignored. When that day comes, the galaxy will have to reckon with what we have become. In the 20th year after banishment, the first vessel of the new generation fleet was ready for launch. The carrier Defiance hung in orbit above Mars, its sleek hull reflecting the distant sun. It was unlike anything humanity had ever built, unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. President Santos attended the launch ceremony. She stood on the observation deck of the shipyard, surrounded by admirals and engineers and politicians who had spent 2 decades working toward this moment. Admiral Shaw was there too. He was 67 years old now, his hair white and his face lined with age. but his eyes were still sharp, and his mind was still keen. He had spent 20 years planning for wars he hoped would never come. "She is beautiful," he said quietly, watching the Defiance move away from the shipyard under her own power. "She is just the beginning," Nancy Park replied. "We have 40 more in various stages of construction. By this time next year, we will have a fleet of over 100 modern warships." President Santos turned to face them both. "The Council thought banishment would destroy us. Instead, it gave us purpose. It gave us time. It gave us the fire we needed to forge ourselves into something new." She looked back at the Defiant as it accelerated toward the outer system on its maiden voyage. 20 years, she whispered. "They thought we would fade away. They have no idea what is coming." Across human space, shipyards hummed with activity. Academies graduated new officers. Scientists continued their research. And somewhere beyond the quarantine line, a galaxy remained blissfully unaware that the species they had cast out was preparing to return. The distress signal came through at 3:47 hours, pulling Captain Samuel Price from an uneasy sleep. He was 34 years old and had commanded the destroyer Relentless for 2 years. His ship was part of a small squadron patrolling the quarantine boundary, watching for any sign of incursion from Council space. In all that time, nothing had crossed the line. Until now. "Captain to the bridge," the intercom announced. "We have contact." Samuel dressed quickly and made his way through the narrow corridors of his ship. The Relentless was compact and efficient, built for speed rather than comfort. Her crew of 92 had trained together for years, preparing for a moment that many believed would never come. Lieutenant Commander Diana met him at the entrance to the bridge. She was his tactical officer, a sharp-minded woman of 29 who had graduated first in her class at the academy. "What do we have?" Samuel asked. "Refugee vessel, sir. Design. They crossed the quarantine line about 20 minutes ago. Their engines are damaged and they are drifting." The Samuel remembered learning about them in school. They were one of the species who had voted against humanity's banishment. They were also the people that humans had freed from that slave convoy 24 years ago. "Are they being pursued?" Diana's face was grim. "Yes, sir, 12 warships. They crossed the line about 5 minutes after the refugee vessel. They are closing fast." Samuel felt his heart rate increase, but he kept his voice calm. "Show me." The main screen activated, displaying a tactical view of the sector. The refugee ship appeared as a small blue dot, moving slowly toward human space. Behind it, 12 red triangles advanced in a hunting formation. "They are demanding we surrender the refugees," Diana reported. "They say the aboard that ship are escaped property and must be returned." Property, the word made Samuel's stomach turn. "What are our orders regarding contact with alien vessels?" he asked, already knowing the answer. "Do not engage. Observe and report. Maintain the quarantine line from our side." Samuel studied the screen. The refugee ship would reach his position in about 40 minutes, though would catch them in 30. "How many are aboard that vessel?" Diana checked her readings. "Approximately 800, sir. Mostly civilians, families, children." 800 lives. Men and women and children who had risked everything to escape slavery. They had fled toward human space because they remembered what humanity had done for their people a generation ago. They believed humans would help them again. Samuel looked around his bridge at the faces of his crew. They were young, most of them, born after the banishment, raised on stories of the Council's injustice and humanity's resilience. They had trained their entire lives for this moment. "Contact the Morning Star and the Faithful," he ordered, nomming the other 2 destroyers in his squadron. "Tell them to form up on our position. We are going to intercept that refugee vessel." Diana's eyes widened slightly. "Sir, our orders." "I know our orders, Lieutenant Commander. I also know that I cannot watch 800 innocent people be dragged back to slavery while we do nothing." He turned to face his crew directly. "This is not a drill. They believe we are weak. They think they can cross into our space and take whatever they want. They are about to learn how wrong they are." A fierce energy filled the bridge. These men and women had spent their careers preparing for a fight that seemed like it might never come. Now it was here. The three human destroyers moved to intercept the refugee vessel. Samuel opened a channel to the commander. "Fleet, this is Captain Samuel Price of the Terran destroyer Relentless. You have entered human space without authorization. Turn back immediately or face the consequences." The response came quickly. On the screen a face appeared, scaled and arrogant with eyes that held nothing but contempt. "Human vessel, I am of the Imperial Navy. You have no authority here. The galaxy belongs to the Council, not to your pathetic little species. Stand aside or be destroyed." Samuel smiled coldly. "The galaxy may have forgotten about us, but we have not been idle. I suggest you turn your ships around before you discover what we have become." Laughed. It was the same harsh clicking sound that had made in the council chamber 24 years ago. 3 destroyers against 12 warships. Human, you are either brave or stupid. Perhaps both. It matters not. You will die here and your species will learn its place. The channel closed. The fleet accelerated. "All ships battle stations," Samuel ordered. "Diana, target their lead vessels. Fire on my command." The next 15 minutes would be studied at military academies across the galaxy for centuries to come. They expected an easy victory. Their ships were larger. Their numbers were greater. They had been fighting wars for thousands of years while humans were still learning to make fire. They did not expect human weapons that could penetrate their shields with a single shot. They did not expect human ships that could dance around their formations like ghosts. They did not expect tactics that broke every rule of galactic warfare. Samuel commanded from the center of the chaos, his voice calm and steady as he issued orders. Diana coordinated targeting solutions with machine-like precision. The crews of all 3 human ships performed flawlessly, moving as one unified force. Within 10 minutes, 8 ships were disabled or destroyed. The remaining 4 broke formation and fled back toward the quarantine line. Was among the survivors. His flagship limped away with half its systems offline, its crew dead or dying around him. He stared at the tactical display in disbelief. "Impossible," he whispered. "They were supposed to be primitives." The refugee vessel was towed to safety. 800 were brought aboard human ships, given food and water and medical care. Many of them wept when they realized they were truly free. A young woman approached Captain Samuel on the deck of the Relentless. She was holding a small child in her arms. "Thank you," she said simply. "We heard stories about humans, that you were the only species that ever stood up for us. We prayed those stories were true." Samuel looked at the child, at the fear and hope mixed in its alien eyes. "They were true," he said. "You are safe now, all of you." News of the battle spread through the galaxy within days. They tried to suppress it, but too many witnesses had seen what happened. Too many signals had been intercepted. The humans were back. They were stronger than anyone had imagined, and they had just destroyed a battle group with 3 small ships. In the council chamber on Prime, High Arbiter received the reports with growing unease. 24 years ago, he had signed the order banishing humanity from galactic civilization. He had believed it was the end of the human story. Now he understood it had only been the beginning. The message arrived through channels that officially did not exist. Secretary Ellen Moore read it 3 times before responding. She was 73 years old now, her hair silver and her movements slower than they once were. But her mind remained as sharp as the day she had stood before the council and accepted humanity's banishment. The message was from a leader among the people. It requested a secret meeting to discuss an alliance. Ellen smiled as she drafted her reply. 28 years of patience were finally bearing fruit. The meeting took place on a small moon at the edge of human space. Ellen arrived with a minimal escort, wanting to show trust rather than strength. Came alone, a gesture of vulnerability that Ellen respected deeply. They were tall and slender, with skin that shifted colors based on their emotions. Skin was a cautious blue when they first met, gradually warming to purple as their conversation progressed. "We have watched humanity for many years," said. "Even before your banishment, you were different from the other council species. You freed our people when no one else would help. You suffered for that kindness." Ellen nodded slowly. "We believed it was the right thing to do. We still believe that." The right thing. Skin rippled with complex patterns. These are words that council species rarely speak. For them, there is only power and profit. Right and wrong are concepts for the weak. And yet here you are speaking with us. Leaned forward. "They have enslaved my people for 300 years. The council permits this because they are powerful and they are not. We have begged for help from every species. All of them turned away, all except humans." Ellen understood what was being offered. It was not just an alliance. It was a chance to build something the galaxy had never seen. "What exactly are you proposing?" "My people wish to join with yours, not as subjects or servants but as partners. We have knowledge of galactic politics that you lack. We have contacts among other oppressed species. We have resources that the Council does not know we possess. And in return..." Skin turned a deep, resolute purple. "In return, you give us what no one else will: a home, protection, a chance to live free." Ellen extended her hand in the human gesture of agreement, studied it for a moment, then grasped it with her own slender fingers. "Then let us build something together," Ellen said. Over the following months, the relationship deepened. The refugees who had been rescued by Captain Price were given a colony world of their own. They named it New Hope and began building a civilization free from chains. Word spread through the darker corners of the galaxy. The humans were offering sanctuary to those who had been abandoned by the Council. They were accepting allies who had been rejected everywhere else. The came next. They were a small species, barely 3 feet tall, with 4 arms and quick minds. They had nearly exterminated them in a war 40 years ago. The survivors had been scattered across the galaxy, living in hiding, dreaming of a home they thought they would never have. Prime, their elected representative, met with Ellen on the diplomatic station that humanity had built just inside the quarantine line. "We have little to offer," Prime admitted. "We are few in number. Our technology was destroyed long ago. We survive only through stealth and patience." Ellen smiled warmly. "You offer yourselves, your skills, your determination. That is more valuable than any technology. The Council species see us as vermin to be exterminated. Why would humans think differently? Because we know what it feels like to be cast out, to be told that we have no value, to be abandoned by those who should have helped us." Prime was silent for a long moment. Then he bowed deeply in the gesture of profound respect. "My people will follow humanity. We will fight beside you. We will die beside you if necessary. You have given us something we thought was lost forever." "What is that?" "Hope." The alliance grew. The who had been used as forced labor by for centuries sent secret envoys. A faction of dissidents, disgusted by their own species' behavior, made contact and offered intelligence about Council military movements. Fleet Admiral Shaw oversaw the integration of allied species into the growing Terran military. He was 67 years old now, his body aged but his spirit unbroken. He had spent his entire career preparing for this moment. "We do not ask you to become human," he told the assembled representatives of a dozen species. "We ask only that you fight beside us as equals. Your tactics, your knowledge, Your unique abilities will all have a place in our combined force." A officer raised her hand. "Admiral, the Council species have always placed humans in command of allied forces. They see other species as tools to be used. How do we know humans will be different?" Metter gazed directly. "You do not know, not yet. Trust must be earned through action, not words. I can only promise you this. In our fleet, every species will be valued, every voice will be heard, and when we face the Council together, we will face them as partners." The Terran Alliance was formally established in the 28th year after humanity's banishment. It was not an empire built on conquest, but a coalition of the abandoned, humans, and others who had been forgotten by a galaxy that cared only for power. President Grant addressed the Alliance at its founding ceremony. He was the third president since the banishment, a man who had been only 4 years old when humanity was cast out. "We did not seek this path," he said. "We wanted only to be part of galactic civilization, to trade and explore and learn alongside other species. That dream was taken from us, but in its place, we have built something better, a home for all who have none, a voice for all who have been silenced, a force that will stand against tyranny wherever we find it." The chamber erupted in cheers from a dozen different species, each crying out in their own language, but united in their emotion. On Prime, High Arbiter received intelligence reports about the Terran Alliance with growing alarm. What had begun as a single banished species had become a multi-world coalition with a fleet of over 300 modern warships. He called an emergency session of the Council. The same chamber where humanity had been condemned now buzzed with fear and uncertainty. "We must act," Delegate insisted. "Every day we wait, the humans grow stronger. They are absorbing our enemies, our dissidents, our slaves. If we do not stop them now, they will threaten the foundations of galactic order." Listened to the debate with a heavy heart. He remembered Ellen Moore standing on the central platform, warning that humanity would build something of their own. He had not believed her then. He believed her now. "What do you propose?" he asked quietly. Scaled face twisted into a predatory smile. "A preemptive strike, overwhelming force. We destroy them before they become too powerful to destroy." The Council voted. This time, humanity had no representative to speak in its defense. War was coming. The Council fleet gathered at the quarantine boundary, like a storm preparing to break. 500 warships from a dozen species formed the largest military force assembled in 3 centuries. Battle cruisers, command carriers, weapons platforms from species whose names humans had never learned, all of them united by a single purpose: destroy the Terran Alliance before it grew too powerful to stop. Fleet Admiral Shaw studied the enemy formation from the bridge of the flagship Unity. He was 69 years old, and he knew this would be his final campaign. 30 years of preparation had led to this moment. "Admiral, the Council fleet is holding position just outside the quarantine line," reported Rear Admiral Samuel Price, who commanded the Unity's battle group. The young captain who had fought the 6 years ago had risen quickly through the ranks. "They want us to come to them," observed. "They expect us to defend the boundary and meet them head-on." "Will we?" Smiled slightly. "We will do exactly what they expect, at first." Behind the Unity, the Terran Alliance fleet spread across thousands of kilometers of space. 400 warships crewed by humans, and a dozen other species. Smaller than the Council force, but armed with technology the galaxy had never faced and tactics no one had ever seen. The battle began at dawn, Earth time. The Council fleet advanced across the quarantine line, confident in their numbers and their ancient traditions of warfare. Their admirals had fought 100 campaigns. They knew exactly how wars were won. The Terran Alliance met them at what the history books would call the threshold. The fighting was brutal from the first moment. Council ships unleashed weapons that could crack moons. Alliance ships responded with precision strikes that disabled enemy vessels with surgical accuracy. Commanded from the center of the formation, his voice calm and steady as chaos erupted around him. 30 years of planning had prepared him for this. Every tactic, every maneuver, every contingency had been rehearsed until it was instinct. Second Fleet execute Pattern 7, he ordered. Squadrons target their command ships. Units look for gaps in their formation. The Alliance fought as one unified force. Species that had been enemies for centuries now coordinated their attacks with perfect timing. Human destroyers covered cruisers. Scouts identified weaknesses that heavier ships exploited. The Council commanders were bewildered. They had expected primitives fighting with stolen technology. Instead, they faced a military machine unlike anything in galactic history. 3 hours into the battle, the Council fleet began to break. Ships that had never known defeat turned and fled. Others surrendered rather than face destruction. The great armada that was supposed to end the human threat shattered against the Alliance like waves against a cliff. When the fighting finally ended, 200 Council ships had been destroyed or captured. The Alliance had lost 47 vessels. It was a victory beyond anything anyone had dared to hope for. But Shaw was not interested in victory. He was interested in what came next. All ships hold position, he ordered. Do not pursue the retreating vessels. Samuel looked at him with surprise. Admiral, we could finish them. Their fleet is broken. We could push into Council space and end this war today. And become exactly what they accused us of being, conquerors, tyrants, shook his head slowly. No, Samuel, we did not fight for 30 years to become another empire. We fought to prove that there is a better way. On Earth, President Grant received news of the victory with mixed emotions. He understood what was thinking, because they had discussed this possibility many times. Contact the Council, he instructed his communications officer. Tell High Arbiter that we wish to negotiate. The Council chamber on Prime had never been so quiet. High Arbiter sat on his throne, but he no longer looked like a ruler. He looked like a being who had watched his entire world collapse around him. The fleet that was supposed to restore galactic order had been shattered. The species he had cast out 30 years ago had become the most powerful force in known space. And now their representative stood before him again. Secretary Ellen Moore was 78 years old. She walked slowly now, supported by a cane, but her eyes were as fierce as they had been on the day of humanity's banishment. You could have destroyed us, said quietly. Your fleet could have pushed into Council space, conquered our worlds, taken your revenge for everything we did to you. Ellen nodded. We could have, we chose not to. Why? Because revenge is not who we are. It is not who we ever were. Ellen stepped closer to the throne, her voice carrying across the silent chamber. We never wanted to fight you. We wanted to be part of something greater than ourselves. You rejected us because we showed compassion to slaves. You cast us out because we refused to accept that some lives matter less than others. She paused, gathering her strength. Now we are offering you a choice. The old council is finished. Its laws protected the powerful and crushed the weak. Its treaties made slavery legal and mercy a crime. That cannot continue. Leaned forward. What are you proposing? A new order. Not a human empire, but a true alliance of equals. Every species with a voice. Every civilization with a vote. Laws that protect the helpless instead of exploiting them. Trade that benefits all parties instead of just the strong. You would share power with us after everything we did to you. Ellen smiled, and for a moment she looked like the young ambassador who had stood in this chamber 3 decades ago. We would, because that is what we always wanted, to build something better together. The negotiations lasted weeks. Not every council species agreed to the new terms. The Empire refused to abandon slavery and from galactic politics entirely, retreating to their own space to nurse their hatred. A few other species followed them, but most accepted. They had seen what humanity had built during its 30 years of exile, not just a military force, but a coalition of hope, a place where the forgotten could find a home. The new Galactic Assembly held its first session 1 year after the Battle of the Threshold. Representatives from 63 species took their seats. Humans sat beside, shared platforms with. Former enemies learned to become partners. Fleet Admiral Shaw retired after the treaty was signed. He had spent his entire adult life preparing for a war that he always hoped could end with something other than destruction. On the observation deck of a station orbiting Earth, he stood watching the stars with Ellen Moore, two old warriors who had given everything for a future they might not live to see. "We could have conquered them," he said quietly. "We had the strength." "We could have," Ellen agreed, "but that was never who we were." Below them, a patrol ship departed from the station. It was crewed by humans and working side by side, part of the first joint peacekeeping force in galactic history. On the observation deck of that ship, a young human officer named Vila watched the stars together. They had been born after the banishment, raised in a galaxy that their parents had helped to change. "Do you think it will last?" Vila asked. "This peace we have built?" Considered the question carefully. "I do not know, but I know that my grandparents were told humanity would never matter, that we would fade away and be forgotten. They proved the galaxy wrong." He turned to face his friend and partner. "If peace fails, we will build it again. That is what humans do. We build, we adapt, we never give up." He smiled. "And we never ever forget those who stand beside us." Vila's skin shifted to the warm purple of deep friendship. "Then, let us build something worth remembering." Together, they watched as the ship called Hope carried them toward the stars.